Welcome to The Heart of the Matter, an Our Place podcast, where we look at the issues surrounding homelessness, addiction, and mental health on the streets of Greater Victoria. I think we can begin, in theory.
Okay. We're ready. Are you okay with my bird being here? Like, I'm not showboating or anything. If she's not here, she's squawking somewhere, so.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, she's ignoring us though. She's got her back to us, but
she'll probably fall asleep. So good.
Apart from that, it's fine. So welcome to Our Place's podcast. We're still coming up with a fancy name for it, and I'm sure we will come up with something soon. So today I am welcomed by Kathleen and Leslie, both of Moms Stop the Harm. So thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you for being here, for us being here.
Yeah.
So the first question is basically, could you describe what exactly Moms Stop the Harm is and what inspired it to be started?
Yes, I think I'm probably well positioned, Kathleen, to answer this one. Back in 2014, I lost my only child, my son Jordan, at age 25 to a compendium of prescription drugs that he was able to access through walk-in clinics and so on. He had become addicted to oxycodone through a doctor's prescription. That's the very short story. He'd had some issues with substances before that. So when I was able to actually function again after that, I searched out and found two other women who had similarly lost their sons to drug harms, Petra Schultz and Lorna Thomas. Petra's son, Danny, died of fentanyl poisoning, and Lorna's son, Alex, died of a drug-related suicide. The three of us got together, again, short story, together and realized what we really, really wanted to do, besides the obvious, which was to not have any other family have to go through this kind of trauma and grief, was to work to change drug policies, to advocate for better drug policies, ones that supported the lives of people who use drugs, ones that help them get what they need and help them stay alive, essentially. And this was sort of the beginning of what we see as the worst part of the fentanyl crisis, poisoning crisis. So anyway, the three of us got together. Took us a while, we get a website and a name, just like you're doing with Our Place, figure out a name and figure out how to reach people and talk to government bodies and try and get on committees and so on. So that's kind of what we did and still doing. We've gone from the three of us to almost 4,000 members across the country. So we have members in every province. We have leaders in every province. And so today, and most of our membership is here in BC, and because we have the most population, we have the biggest number of people using drugs. So we're still sort of on that trajectory. We're advocating. We have support groups now, which the government helps fund, which is very ironic because they fund us for people in grief and people who have loved ones struggling. And at the same time, they're not doing anything about the fact that we've got so many families in grief and so many people struggling. But we take their funds gratefully, and we have support groups, mostly in BC and Alberta and Ontario probably, but still some across the country. So that's sort of the short version.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Anything you want to add, Kathleen?
No, I actually came in contact with Moms Stop the Harm in August 2018. Our son almost died from a septic shock. He had crossed over to using needles, and after a couple of weeks, one was contaminated, and they saved his life. And I reached out to Moms Stop the Harm in my crazy, as a family who never even saw this on the horizon with our son. I was just frantically looking for supports. And I was shocked at how little there was out there for families that were trying to navigate the system, because we really got a crash course in addiction recovery and relapse. We had no idea what we were doing. So we were not only grieving the struggle that our son was going through, and trying to figure it all out, but we were trying to navigate a very broken system. And Mom Stop the Harm was a safe place for us to land. And I joined a Holding Hope group. Although, you know what, I'll admit, I never thought we were like any of those families. And I've come to realize we were like many of those families. And then our son died in June 2016, on the 16th of June. And he died 8 days after his 26th birthday. And I now am part of the grieving part of Mom Stop the Harm advocacy, working on sharing our voice and helping people change the way that they see addiction, and changing the narrative through our words and our actions.
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking when you see names and faces put to the dead, because the death toll is rising every month, and it almost feels like people are becoming numb to it. And I think that's part of our storytelling, is letting people know that these are loved human beings with families and lives. And a lot of times, I find that in my work, a lot of times people don't see that these are real people struggling with, real addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that this sort of addiction crisis that we're in the midst of, do you feel it's getting worse? Are you seeing more moms losing their children?
I would say we are seeing more moms join us. Whether that means, excuse me, more families losing kids or youth or loved ones, it's hard to say. I mean, we know that, as you said, all the every month the numbers are, well, sometimes they stay the same, and go up and down, but basically the trajectory is up. So we know more people are dying, and I don't think, frankly, we have a crisis of addiction as much as we have a crisis of toxic drug poisoning. Whether addictions are on the rise, again, that's a hard statistic to find. You can dig and dig, but we really don't know. Nobody knows what's going on out there, enough to give a statistic. But certainly drug use is producing more deaths because of the drug supply. So that's kind of the wobbly answer to your question. We have more moms. We've noticed more moms joining us. And I shouldn't say just moms, because sometimes it's dads and brothers, and it's men as well, mostly moms, joining us very soon after the loss of their child, especially. It used to be it would take a year for them to find us, but people are finding us much more quickly, or much more in a deep state of grief. And I'll just add quickly that when Jordan died, and sort of as Kathleen said, we had no support. We had nothing. We were just like left out in the cold with our good friends. I mean, we had good friends around us and family, but you don't know how to navigate the loss of a child until it happens. And it's like the worst thing that can ever happen to a mother, to a family.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think that in my view, from what I'm seeing, and of course I'm only seeing the street population and not the whole population. I'm kind of seeing people who have really fallen through the cracks, and really it certainly seems to be growing. And maybe it's just because stigma has been lifted a bit, so people are more out in the open. And also because of the toxic drug supply, people are more in the open, because that's where they're going to get help. If they're hidden away, they're definitely going to die on their own. So maybe just more visible. But I also know from lots of people that when you try to get help for someone, especially if it's street drugs, they tend not to give you the help. It's a lot of times we'll send people to the hospital or whatever, and it's like, we've declared that they're a harm to either themselves or others. They get to the hospital and they're released 20 minutes later, and it's like, good grief, what more can you do? I've noticed that one of the things that your Mom Stop the Harm is very driven towards is safe supply. I don't like the term safe supply, I like clean supply. But towards that, do you think that that if that was brought in, I know there's some tests happening in Vancouver and Victoria, but if that was brought in a large scale, do you think it would make a difference in the long term?
My short and quick answer is yes, a giant yes.
Yeah.
Kathleen, if you want to go ahead and
Yeah, I think that there's a lot, and I think probably one of the, absolutely. I mean, would it have changed, so many people? And I think that's what, going back to what Leslie said, this is no longer an addiction or people dying from drug use. This is a toxic drug poisoning crisis that we have on our hands. And safe supply is the appropriate ethical response to this crisis. It is, harm reduction in any way is the only thing that's going to save. It's the only thing that's going to change the numbers immediately is access to safe supply. And I think that this is the big part of it is educating people to understand what safe supply looks like. So many people say to me, what does that look like? Or we're not standing on the street corner handing out clean drugs. That's not what this is about. This is about wraparound supports. It's giving people an opportunity to be able to get through relapse into recovery, because not everybody is ready for recovery right now. But with the wraparound supports, there will come a time where they will be ready for treatment, to access that treatment. And we want to keep them alive. Leslie and I were just talking about this the other day, the amount of times people relapse. There's people that relapse, 7 to 20 times in a period of their recovery. What's happening with this toxic drug supply is my son died on a 6th relapse. He didn't have an opportunity to build that bridge to his recovery, to full recovery, dealing with the trauma and all of the things that he was dealing with. So absolutely. And one of the big things I talk about a lot is educating people around what safe supply really looks like.
Yeah, I think, we're at our place, we're huge supporters of recovery. We've opened up our therapeutic recovery community in View Royal. That's doing extremely well. There's 35 men in there now. And it's a 9-month to 2-year program. And we've really found that, especially if people make it to that 9-month mark, chances are they tend to go on for the full 2 years. But the relapse rate, if they've reached that 9-month mark, is hardly close to zero. Whereas at the 3-month mark, a lot of times people are relapsing after 48 hours when they've left the program. So we really find this longer program. And we definitely see that. Where, what I really notice on the streets, especially with crystal meth, is that so few of the people ever seem to make that decision. Some do, and I know of a few people personally that have, after their 3rd overdose or toxic drug death that's been reversed, have turned their lives around and really found that support, which is incredible. But you don't see a lot of the people actually making that choice, and I do tend to wonder if there needs to be some incentive for people to make that choice. Any thoughts?
Such as, what kind of incentive would you offer?
Well, I was kind of thinking that something like, if you were to go into a clean supply model, would part of that be that after 6 months you would then go into recovery, or go into detox and then recovery? And and during that 6 months, of course, of the clean supply, you're explaining exactly what recovery is and how it could be beneficial. I wonder if there would be, I suppose if it's presented in the right way, there would be definitely an uptick on that. But but do you think that type of incentive would work, or do you think that people would be looking at clean supply for life?
It depends. It's just like they say with autism and Alzheimer's and so on. If you know one person who is addicted, one person who's addicted. You don't know what that person's life has been like. You don't know the trauma they've gone through. And so they may want to be on a clean supply forever for the rest of their life. Okay, who am I to judge? But on the other hand, as you say, people who do, I've never talked to anyone who's addicted. Oh, no, that's not exactly true. I've talked to very few people who are addicted who want to continue to be addicted. You know, they'd like to be off, but it's too scary, and or you know, whatever the circumstances are. So what you're suggesting sounds amazing, and I think that sounds like a great incentive. But we always have to remember to meet people where they're at, and to continue as they evolve through their drug use or through their recovery, to meet them where they're at and to keep supporting them. And that's kind of what it sounds like you're suggesting as an incentive. I think that would be, you know, if that was a dependable, real incentive that people would, you probably know better than I do, but I'm guessing just in the human experience that people would take you up on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, because I do look at Clean Supply as a bridge. We had one young man in his 20s who was going to come into New Roads, and but he overdosed the day before, you know, or you know, not overdosed, but died of toxic drug supply the day before. And it's kind of like if Clean Supply had been available to him, that would have gotten him through that little bridge, and then he could have got into recovery like he'd planned, like he wanted. You know, and so I find that heartbreaking, you know, that
and you know, Grant, I also think that for my son's story, and many of the people that were in first and second stage housing with him, many of them were peeling back the layers of themselves, trying to, you know, learn more about themselves, learn more about their trauma, coming to terms with some of the things that they had, you know, struggled with, whether that was getting a ADHD, a diagnosis, or whatever it was for them. I saw my son, each time he went through a relapse, he came out stronger, more clear. And I think that is what this opportunity gives and affords those who are struggling. An opportunity to shed some of those things that they've been carrying with them and navigate it with a clear head. And I mean, my son wanted to live. My son had dreams. 3 days before he died, he sent me a photo of a man sitting up on a mountain drinking a cup of coffee. And I thought he wanted the mug that he sent, that the thing. I said, do you want that mug? And he said, no, Mom, I want that life. I want that life.
Yeah.
And I know. And so I believe in everyone, that everyone who would be afforded that opportunity to live. I mean, if you said to someone, do you want to live and work to recovery, or do you want to die? I think you would see most people would choose, I want to live and work towards recovery. And Safe Supply is the response that needs to be given.
It gets there. Dead people don't recover. We all say that. The three of us and everybody we work with says that. If you're dead, you're dead. And everybody's grieving. Everybody around you, no matter who your family of origin or choice is, people are grieving and are impacted heavily by the death. We're losing, I mean, we're losing a generation of youth in a sense. And my son was a lot like Kathleen's son. He had his own business. He had a partner. He had a dog. He had a cat. He had a rental. You know, he was on his way, but during all of that, he was also addicted. You know, and that's what, you know, in the end, that's what got him. And so, yeah, I think, well, Kathleen already said it, but I don't even know what the percentage would be, but probably like in the 90s of people who do want to have a better life and without the drugs and without the risk and without the going into sketchy places. And, you know, so Clean Supply, and what we have to figure out, you know, I say we, because the government's obviously not working very hard at this. I do have a meeting with the OERC, the Overdose Emergency Response part of the Ministry of Mental Health, in a week or so, or less than a week, because I've asked them, what are you doing? What are you doing? Tell me what you're doing about Safe Supply. Because, you know, when we hear Sheila Malcolmson talk, it's just a lot of BS, basically. It's not BS, it's just not what we need. It's like, oh, you have 10 more beds over here? Great, that's helpful. Or, you know, oh, you're planning on putting another detox over there? Well, yay, you know, good for you. but we want to know, and I'm surprised they even answered my letter, but they did give us a time. So we'll see what they're doing. I guess what I'm trying to say, sort of got off on a rant there, but what we're trying to do is find out what this could look like, even in the beginning stages, you know, even tomorrow. I mean, sure, yeah, we got a few pilot projects. That's great. That's wonderful. Why can't we expand those? I mean, I know the reasons, part of the reasons, but you know, we have to keep asking these questions. If it's not impossible, then it's possible.
Yeah.
And so if it's possible, let's work towards that and do it fast, because you know, the old 6 to 7 people are dying every day, and that's old, but it's every day. It's
and I think one of the saddest parts too, Grant, on top of what Leslie said, is that we're seeing a lot of young deaths.
very young, yeah.
We're seeing
Absolutely.
12 and 13 and 14 and 16-year-olds. And I mean, we've seen this government mobilize. We've seen them act so quickly when it came to COVID. And we shake our heads and we can't fathom why they are, you know, we're 7 years into a public health crisis, and here we are. And we're given all of these little things that are supposed to appease us, but the numbers don't lie. And the age of the numbers don't lie. And no more needs to be done. I think what Leslie said is bang on. They're doing everything other than what we're asking them for.
And I say lately, the government, and this is the feds as well as the provincial government, has made a decision to let people die.
Yeah.
And that is, when you frame it like that, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But it's the truth when it comes right down to the bedrock. That is what's going on here. That's what makes us crazy, Grant. That's what makes us, you know, wake up in the middle of the night and say, okay, what else can I do? What more can we do? What can we do differently to make them? Yesterday, I went to Vancouver to speak to the Canadian Council of Women BC chapter. And this is a bunch of older women, older than me, who have been together for, you know, 80 years, you know, all the, you know, the organization. And they're mostly, you know, fairly well-to-do, well-positioned, well-educated women. My colleague Deb Bailey and I went and spoke to them, and they got it big time. They understood. They were, you know, they actually knew more than I thought they would know. They've got a resolution written for the city event to take to the city council of Vancouver. So we don't know where these pockets of advocacy are, but they're out there. And so we just have to keep pushing. And they get safe supply. They're probably, all of them are probably moms. I didn't ask, but you know, anyway.
It's like having a life-saving technique. And not, I mean, we have that with naloxone, right? We've got defibrillators and stuff for people with heart issues. And so why are we not giving access to this treatment that we know will save lives? Period. Full stop.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it almost seems like part of it is invisible. You know, like we tend to see when people, you know, die on the streets, you know, the media will cover that and stuff, but it's like when you look at the death toll, that's only 30% of the people who are dying. We're not really hearing about the 70% of people who are dying in homes who do have good jobs and good lives and stuff like that. And it does still seem to be kind of an invisible taboo subject to talk about.
I think the media has a big part of that. They hold a lot of that responsibility, because whenever they cover the crisis on those days when the numbers come out, or, you know, on those days when it's highlighted in the media, you know, they pan the downtown east side. We see people sleeping in doorways, needles in puddles, and people immediately disconnect because they think that only happens to the unhoused or to those facing barriers or to people who are struggling with mental health issues. But that isn't the truth today. Right? 6 out of 10 toxic drug poisoning deaths are happening in residences like ours.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think actually CBC's gotten a little better, I have to say, because we all write letters we all write letters to all the media when they show those images. something that was brought to my attention just a week or so ago, and I can't even believe I didn't get this at first, but I don't know if you remember the public service announcements that came out from the government like 2 years ago or so. You know, this guy, this kind of average looking guy, he's a dad, he's a hockey player, he's a drug user, he's a carpenter. And then, okay, so everybody looks like, okay. And at first I was like, yeah, okay, other people use drugs as well. But the bottom line on this public service poster says, real people use drugs. And I didn't get that, other people who don't look like this, who might be marginalized, who might be in the downtown east side or in Victoria, aren't real. And I was blown away. So, it's sort of another fact, what's the word? Sorry. Just another side of looking at this deeply and going, oh, for God's sake, they cook, how much did that campaign cost? And they shoot themselves in the foot, with that one line. Anyway, sorry, just went on that rant because I couldn't believe that I didn't get that. It was just like everybody else. Oh, yeah, look, real people. Okay, there's my son. My son was in there. Lots of people were in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, moving forward, how do you feel our organizations, or even multiple organizations, how we can best work together?
I don't know, but if you tell us, we'll do it. I'm not sure exactly. We support, I support what you do, what you folks there do. I've visited a few times, and donated some stuff. But how can we work together? I mean, that's a very good question, and I don't know.
One of the things I think of when I think of, sorry, Grant, when I think of advocacy, period, we stand at many rallies where very few people show up. And one of the things that Leslie and the group of people who have been working with rallies and vigils and all of the important times when the optics are important for people is we ask people to come and stand with our families, just to be present, because it gives us strength to keep advocating. I've stood at many rallies where very few people are there and we shake our heads. So as a community, I mean, we know that, addiction thrives, recovery thrives in community. So if we as a community can come together, we have people from hard law that join our rallies. We have the nurses union, some of them come and join our rallies. The more people we can get out to support, optics are important, but there's power in numbers. And that is what really is going to, I think, is when the government's going to start to see people who are not going to take it anymore and are saying something needs to be done. That's when I think they're going to start to go, okay, there's votes in here, there is. And these are people that we want to vote. And I mean, we have Marian Alto come down. She's been constantly there at rallies and vigils and everything. And I mean, there's power there. So that's how our place, I mean, we can work together and have people from our place come out and join Moms Stop the Harm when we have those, and then find ways that we can support our place as well.
Yeah. Well, I have something fairly, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, fairly prominent happening in the near future that I'll let you know about when it happens, but we're working on something to kind of bring a bit more awareness. I mean, obviously, because of COVID, we now have probably more government funding than we did before because of all the housing and stuff. And so sometimes that handcuffs us a little bit. I'm quite fortunate in that it doesn't handcuff me too much. I have good boss and a good board and stuff like that. So I am able to advocate as much as I can. So I was just to wrap up here, we've got a few minutes left, but I was recently reading, and I thought this was kind of interesting, that there's a new vaccine in development that can prevent you from getting high from fentanyl and Oxycontin. So it's this new vaccine, it's in development, it's working on rats. And my thoughts were, for someone who is going into treatment, for someone who has had that addiction, is going into treatment, and they're concerned about relapse, this vaccine could be a positive thing for them, because it meant that if they did relapse, it wouldn't kill them, and B, it wouldn't give them the high. So it would. But what? Any thoughts on that? Just to wrap up.
Yeah, I have thoughts on that. It sounds good, and for some people, it could be good. It does not address the person's trauma, the reason, or their pain, the reason that they're seeking self-medicate. And what if, I just go to the devil's advocate place, like, what if they had that vaccine and they had a psychotic break because they couldn't self-medicate to get rid of the pain of that trauma or something like that? I don't know how this would all work. And it's certainly, for some people, might just be great. I don't know. It seems a little distant. And if it was an implant, for instance, which could be taken out, which I've heard of, Suboxone implants and so on, that would be one thing. But if it were a vaccine that just has to wear off, or something, I don't know, it could put people in a bad place, but it also could put them in a place where they could continue recovery, my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it just shows you how complex this is. How, if we're not dealing with the underlying causes, we're not dealing with especially on the street, the trauma, the abuse, the continual trauma and abuse that happens. That it's all one big. We need all the agencies working together. We need the mental health, we need the addiction, we need the trauma support, we need the counselors for past trauma, because I don't know anybody living on the street that I've talked to that hasn't faced abuse and trauma from prenatal all the way up. I mean, the number of men that I talked to who have all faced childhood sexual abuse and all that kind of stuff is just, it's heart-wrenching. But it's like very few people, well, hardly nobody is on the street by choice, and I know that the drug use is definitely about self-medication because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no one wants to be in pain.
No, absolutely. Well, I'd like to thank you both for joining me today, and hopefully we'll keep this conversation going.
Anytime. Thanks, Grant. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Heart of the Matter podcast. For more information about our place and the vital programs and services provided to the Greater Victoria community, please go to www.ourplacesociety.com. Our Place is a registered BC charity. You can donate by visiting the website or by calling 250-940-5060. Help us to bring hope and belonging to those in need.